It would be great to hear kind of the elevator pitch about what Merico is for listeners. I bet a lot of listeners probably aren't familiar, and maybe to contextualize all the stuff that we're talking about.
Absolutely. So yeah, in a nutshell, I always like to say that Merico as a company, we're obsessed with pulling out insights from the engineering ecosystem, be that code hosting, issue tracking, CI/CD. We as a company exist to extract the data from those things and translate them into useful insights to help companies and open source projects build better teams, better code, better products. And as we've grown, we've translated this into a variety of products. But it all started for us with our kind of core product, which is extracting insights from the Git history, focused on things like productivity, performance, code quality. But in a nutshell, that's what we're focused on, is finding opportunities to extract insights from all of this tooling that delivers software for companies to build better things.
Matt, you want to go next?
So with that, what components are open source of the tool set?
Yeah, so our flagship product is DevLake, which I'm proud to have been the kind of person launching it. It's one of the most fun parts of my career, to be honest with you. That's 100% open source under the Apache license. We launched it about 14 months ago. And then I think around 7 months ago, give or take, we end up joining the Apache Software Foundation's incubator program. And that was in part, right? There's many benefits and many costs as well that I could talk to for doing that. But one of the benefits for us was for the community and really kind of signaling to them, right, that this is not just some venture-backed startup doing open source as a hobby or as a bait and switch, right? Like, this is open source in the truest standard and always will be. Certainly could talk to that too about the frustrations I've seen from the community of open source in name only, or suddenly finds an opportunity to fork it or change it in a way that stops it from being that. So that was one big factor for us, certainly.
So with this, Apache was really, excuse me, a way for you to give comfort to the community and say, like, we're in this for the long haul. This isn't something that will go away. Even if we change our business model, it will still be available under that same license.
Exactly. Because I think it's certainly been my experience having spoken with so many developers who are either true open source, as their whole life and career, or even developers at enterprises contributing to open source. I think a common concern and frustration they have is, you could almost boil it down to, I don't want to accidentally be doing free work for something that's going to become closed source, or is going to be, monetized in a way that isn't harmonious with the reason I'm doing this in the first place. I think that's what those concerns boil down to. So I think whether you're going to the foundation route, or whether you're not and you're open source as a company, and I think it's crucial to find ways to not just communicate that this is true open source, here's why, here's how, and it always will be. I think it's important to be consistently laying down kind of reminders and proof points of your commitment to that, to ensure that people can feel comfortable not just contributing to it, but relying upon it, finding opportunities to cook it into long-term strategies or architectures. I think that's something, a more kind of subtle mistake that I feel I see people making frequently is finding ways to kind of maybe spook their audience or spook the community, or maybe just kind of erode their trust that this is what it's going to be open source forever, and really is. I think where they fail.
No one would ever do that, would they? No one would ever say that it's going to be open source forever and then not stick to that. We haven't seen that before.
Oh, yeah.
But no, that makes a lot of sense, right?
So was that a concern that your customers were raising before? Was Merico started with all these pieces open source from the very beginning, or was that something that you moved towards after launching?
It's a great question. So open source has been part of our DNA truly since like day zero, and I'll talk about a bit why. So I always like to talk about, as a company that's fundamentally an analytics company, right? I think the lineage is always important, and I think we see a lot of analytics companies that, even if they're well intended, have been kind of born out of a very kind of business centric or HR centric perspective. And maybe that's not always wrong, but I don't think it's always right for sure. And where our company was born, our co-founder and CTO, Hezhong Yin, based here in California with me, he was conducting research at UC Berkeley in their PhD computer science program. And the question he was ultimately seeking to answer is, how do you effectively assess and quantify contribution to open source in a way that could translate to better recognition, more effective compensation, and more effective allocation of all of these things, right? Not all contributions are created equal, not all commits are created equal. So how do you account for that? And that was the true kind of birth of the company, was the pursuit of this answer focused on the open source kind of funding problem. And as we've grown, I think like any company seeking to grow to great heights, we have large ambitions that are financial, and figuring out how you harmonize that with wanting to also play this kind of open source approach can be challenging. And I won't lie that that we've had it figured out from day one, right? We've vacillated between like looking at different iterations of the open core model, different iterations of the open source model, and really kind of everything in between. And I think what we've found is that we can ultimately kind of get the best of all worlds by doing what we're doing today, which is having a product like DevLake that is 100% open source, will always be 100% open source, and kind of use that as something that's benevolent for the entire ecosystem. Even for for our competitors, I think it's benevolent and useful. And that this can ultimately drive the bigger picture for us in many different ways. But I would say for us, kind of going back to, kind of the why open source question that's buried in this, I think one big part for us that we've learned on our journey doing kind of data and analytics driven technologies is that, especially when you're serving, a engineering audience, developers are smart people who want to look under the hood. They're skeptical. If they think that something is maybe doing something incorrectly or hiding something from them, it's going to arouse their suspicions, and rightfully so. So to really kind of put our money where our mouths are, to earn their trust, not just win it, but earn their trust, we knew fundamentally that bringing something truly transparent to the table was going to be critical for our long-term success. So for us, going this open source kind of first pathway has really been our love letter to transparency in many ways. It's been answering this frustration we've seen in the market, littered with many analytics products, where people don't like an opaque solution. They don't like black boxes. They don't like something that they maybe can't trust because they can't see how it's working. What better way to solve for that than going completely open source, completely transparent? So that's really kind of what fundamentally led us to this pathway today.